Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we are talking about Space Marine early game heroes. We're going to talk about the Kill Team Ironmaw, the Librarian, Jonah Orion, and Gabriel Angelos in this video. That's the goal. We'll cover the other Space Marine heroes in other videos. So let's get to it. Let's start with the Kill Team Ironmaw. In my opinion, by the way, Space Marines have some of the best heroes in the game. I think all of the heroes, let me rephrase it. I think the Space Marine and Eldar both have very, very strong heroes, but I think the Space Marine have some of the most synergetic heroes with their units than of all of the factions. In large part because the Space Marine faction is so one-dimensional with Assault Marines right now, and it lacks so much in terms of having anti-armor abilities for them. So for me, it's very important, the hero selection for Space Marine, because it's going to fill a lot of the holes in your arsenal as a Space Marine player. So let's talk about Kill Team Ironmaw. This is a phenomenal hero. It's very cheap at 2 points, coming in at 2 elite points, so it's going to be the first thing that's deployed. If you have Death Watch Presence, Death from Above, which you're often going to have on this guy, I think it's better than Death Watch Command. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but it can be deployed anywhere if you have this, which means it's very, very good for pushing points, especially early game, because you don't have to own the point to deploy him, which means the instant you have the ability to get the elite points out, you can deploy him, and he's a game changing, a fight changing hero when he's deployed. The damage on them initially isn't that great. 24 melee DPS is quite low, 24 normal melee DPS, and 40 range normal DPS isn't that good either. 40 range DPS is basically less than a shooter squad, a boys shooter squad. It's only marginally better than I think it's 28 DPS for a tactical squad, so it's like, you know, it's not good DPS. However, as soon as he's deployed, as soon as this team is deployed, they're able to be upgraded with a weapon of your choice. You can either choose a flamer or a rocket launcher. You do not require an armory for this, which is interesting. I think in beta you might have required an armory. I'm not entirely sure, but you don't now require an armory. And it doesn't cost any resources. You just are clicking, and it's an instant upgrade. There's no time on it. You just click C or V, and you get yourself either a flamer or a rocket launcher. The flamer is an AoE weapon, which is great, and it ups their DPS supposedly to 98 normal DPS, which is pretty big upgrade from 40. More than doubles their DPS in terms of unit DPS, and it makes it AoE. So it hits enemies in a cone, which is pretty damn awesome. It's very, very strong versus infantry. The range isn't great. It's a short to medium range weapon. It's certainly outside melee range, but it's not massively outside of melee range. Just be aware, he will move towards targets you tell him. This group also has an ability called a Vortex Grenade. I primarily use this for slow, but I was just reading this description as I was making this video, and it also apparently has other benefits to it. So it's a fairly big area of effect slow, about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times the area of a normal grenade in terms of the amount covered. You know, it's a bigger radius circle essentially, which is a slow, and it's quite a strong slow. As well as applying a marked for death debuff, apparently. In units marked for death, take percentage damage over time, which is refreshed whenever they're attacked by the Death Watch. So it should let you focus fire something in the center of that grenade, or the back end of that grenade, fairly efficiently to do fairly good damage to it across time. But most of the slow is what you're going to be using for that. Use that all the time. Yeah, it has a 60-second cooldown like most of the grenades, but just use this. Use this a lot. I forget to use it all the time, and it's a total waste not to be using it. It's a very, very powerful game-changing ability, and it really ups their damage, right, to get them out, using that slow to keep them in range. You're not chasing, you're just DPSing, which is great. The other ability that the Kill Team Ironmaw has is called Teleport Homer. This is also a fairly good ability. When you first deploy him, it's going to start on quite a long cooldown. I think it will actually start at full cooldown, so you have 3 minutes before you can use this after you first deploy it. But basically what happens is when you use this ability, this team stands still, channels for 10 seconds, and after they've channeled for 10 seconds, you can deploy them again. One of the nice things about Space Marine and about the Kill Team Ironmaw is when you deploy them, you're going to get the orbital. You're going to get the shield that you get when you deploy Space Marines from orbit. So unsummoning him and resummoning him is A, going to refresh their hit points. It gets them to full health, and B, you're going to get that orbital shield again, and C, you get to change the weapon that you're using. So if you previously upgraded them with the flamer, you can switch it on the redeployment to the rocket launcher if you want. And the rocket launcher changes their damage to 101 armor piercing DPS, and it's very high alpha, very slow reload, which means it's one shot, followed by a long period of time in between the next shot, and those shots do a lot of armor piercing damage. That's the perfect type of setup, high alpha, low rate of fire, to deal with things like land speeder harasses or that type of stuff. Because what's happening is, as those skimmer units are dashing in and out, doing damage to your structures, trying to avoid your units, then every time they dash in, they catch a rocket to the face, and you can partially counter heavy armor vehicles using this when there's not very many of them, or it's very early in the game and they've come out unexpectedly. This is a very good unit to have. You can deploy them to that area instantly and then reset the grab a rocket and help chase those off, which is quite nice. So this does a really good has a really good ability of filling the part of the armor-piercing hole that the Space Marines really lack. Their units can't really take over. Yes, the Assault Marines do good armor-piercing damage, but they're melee, so they are vulnerable to being kited by long-range, by armor-piercing units, and they're also vulnerable to the late-game fact that you just can't have melee units running into like a 3v3 at the front lines. They're just going to instantly die as low-hit point infantry, and these guys do a good job of filling that hole. Additionally, because the rocket has fairly decent range, where a lot of the two-point elites in the late game suffer because they're on the front lines and die very, very quickly in the front lines, the Kill Team Ironmaw has a little bit of survivability late game if you switch off the flamer and switch to the rocket launcher, because they'll stay a little bit further back, so they're not going to be instantly targeted, but they're still able to contribute decent armor-piercing range DPS. So be aware, this is a fairly good hero overall. 2 elite doctrines. I believe you start with Death Watch Presence, Death from Above, which lets you deploy anywhere and allows you to deploy other elites around them. Decent in team games, I suppose, for getting for early game, especially if you have like Orc and Eldar on your team and you're pushing an enemy node. Well, your allies can deploy around you. I think your other allies can deploy around you. I'm pretty sure about that. But you can also deploy more elites around it. But mostly I take this for the fact that I can deploy these guys anywhere. I don't care so much about my second and third elites deploying on them. Often by then we have established boundaries and I can just deploy them somewhere else. But it is nice for that instant game-changing effect of having them hit the field before your enemy heroes can hit the field and get to you. Death Watch Command, Land Speeder Mark. This is an okay buff. It makes your Land Speeder do more damage to a target it's shooting at, which is okay. I'm not sure if it applies it to a building. I suspect it doesn't. I think this is a unit only debuff, but I'm not entirely sure. I'd love to know if you guys know. Please post in the comment section and let me know. But I don't generally worry about this too much. I'm certainly not rushing to level my kill team to level 8 so that I can have this available as an army doctrine, because I just don't think it's powerful enough. Mostly I'm not chasing units too much with land speeders. Oftentimes I'm trying to do some sort of harass or just pick off fleeing units, and a lot of times that extra land speeder buff is not worth a doctrine. And I miss being able to deploy my Death Watch team wherever I want, so I often choose Death Watch Present over Death Watch Command. But this ability isn't terrible. It's worth considering for some sort of special strategy you're trying, where it could also be quite decent. Okay, let's move on. Good team overall. Decent DPS once they're upgraded. Nice flexibility. I really like that team. Moving on to Librarian Jonah Orion. A powerful hero that I don't love. I think it is a decent hero. This is the go-to 1v1 hero. His combo is extremely strong, although I think he lacks versatility, and I think his combo is fairly counterable. But he is the go-to 1v1 Space Marine hero, which probably suggests that he is quite strong. At 3 points, he's a little bit slow. You are going to wait another 120 seconds between when other people are dropping their 2-point heroes and you're dropping your 3-point hero. So that's 2 more minutes of no hero, so which means you're probably losing battles for 2 more minutes, or 90 seconds if you got an elite generator and they didn't for some reason. So that is worth thinking about in terms of that. However, very, very strong when you can combo. Jonah is a ranged hero. It does range DPS, true 38 true range DPS, which means that he doesn't have his damage reduced by heavy armor, which is nice. He's a little bit, again, he's about a medium range here. He doesn't have super long range, but it's not super short range, so he can hit at an okay distance, but not a great distance. But his alpha is lower and his rate of fire is higher, which means he's doing more consistent DPS or more consistent damage. The same doesn't affect the DPS, but it doesn't have that nice alpha strike thing of the rocket launcher on the Killmaw. Oh man, that's hilarious. Let's continue offline and see if I can get back into that. But apparently the Relic servers just went down for some reason as I'm recording that. That's awkward. So let's get back to Jonah. And that the issue with that is it's worse versus harassing, right? Whereas true damage would be good versus a heavy armor vehicle that's harassing you. The low alpha means they're not going to be in range enough for this guy to get a lot of swings off, which means he's not actually doing very high damage to them because he'll only get one swing off every rare amount of occasion, and his single swing doesn't do a lot of damage, basically. He telegraphs his attacks very obviously too. So let's work through what he does. First, the one we need to talk about first, although we're going right to left as opposed to left to right, is Stonewall, but everything else is predicated on this. This puts up a barrier around him. Basically, he toggles it, he hits it on, and then like a couple seconds later, it erects a magic barrier around him, and the barrier blocks movement and absorbs shots that pass through it, so things outside the barrier can't shoot in, and things inside the barrier can't shoot out. I think some things are able to move over it, like for example, Assault Marines can jump over the barrier with using their jump ability, but a lot of things that you think would be able to pass into the barrier can't. For example, I don't think all the grenades do. Maybe none of the grenades pass over it. The barrier is only physically about this tall. You know, it looks like it's about unit model height, maybe like twice unit model height, and there's a big open space over it, but a lot of things can't go over it. But some things can. Skimmers can jump, Assault Marines can, etc. We'll have to play. It'll be a little bit of trial and error to figure out what abilities go over it and which ones don't, because some of the abilities that look like they arc really don't arc. It's just a visual of arcing. Really, they move in a straight line. All right, so that's his first ability. When he activates this, so when he's inside his magical barrier and the Stonewall is activated, his other abilities get better. This ability here initially is a line nuke. It's kind of a short-range line nuke too, so it's quite hard to use. It does true damage and it gives damage to the enemies and a speed buff to the allies it passes through, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. It's not particularly strong to begin with. However, when he's inside the effect of his Stonewall, it buffs the ability. The ability gets nicer. The ability is not only a line anymore. It's now a circle around him, and quite a wide circle at that. So it will hit everything inside the barrier and do damage to all of them, and give speed to all your allies in that area, which is pretty good. And then finally, his third ability is a channeled ability called Emperor's Light. He activates this. He channels it for a couple seconds, and everything around him is blinded, silenced, and can't attack. And when he's got the barrier up, I think the increased damage of allies is increased, and it might move faster or do it a little bit longer or something like that. It makes the ability slightly better. So basically, he runs into your army, casts this Stonewall, cuts you off from retreat, nukes you, and then disables your entire army around you. And hopefully, for the player doing this, for the Space Marine player doing this, while this is happening, either he's had Assault Marines with him or he's jumped Assault Marines in, and they're just doing lots of bonus damage to all your troops as your troops can't fight back. That combo is really powerful if he catches you. However, he's Space Marine. You know the combo is coming from this character. This character is particularly slow. Eldar is it's not particularly slow, but it's not particularly fast. Eldar, for example, are going to be miles and miles faster than this character at all times, and he has to run towards you. He's a ranged unit with not too much health. He's only at 2250 normal health, and he's got to run straight at you to make this happen. Just be aware of what he does, and you should be able to, if not counter him every single time, you should be able to kite a little bit, stay out of harm's reach, and not get caught too often by that ability, all things equal. Finally, after he uses these abilities, he gets increased attack speed temporarily that decays over time for doing this. So he goes into a little bit of beast mode after he uses his combo. The combos are like, that's a 90-second cooldown, that's a 45-second cooldown, that's a 35-second cooldown. Hypothetically, he ought to be able to use these twice every time he uses this. And I believe the ability he starts with his turns the Space Marine standard into a Stonewall as well. So that gives the Space Marine 2 Stonewalls. And I believe these abilities still get supercharged while the standard is down too. So hypothetically, he could do this combo twice every 90 seconds, basically. If he used his cooldowns perfectly, it'd be twice every 90 seconds. In reality, it seems a little bit harder to do, but well, you'll see. You'll get to play with that. I find a Stonewall standard Stonewall a little bit annoying. Oftentimes, I don't want a blockade right there. But I've been told recently, I haven't done it myself yet in a game, but I've been told that you are able to, when you deploy the standard, you can cancel the Stonewall portion of it using a hotkey, I think it's D or something, by selecting the standard and canceling the Stonewall portion while still getting the other buffs out of the standard. In which case, it would make him a lot better, because then you'd have a blockade on demand that's not always a blockade, which seems pretty good. His other ability is, if you choose other doctrine, is Jonah Orion's command Blind Grenade. I don't really understand this ability. Basically, scout grenades are already a stun. A stunned unit can't move and can't cast because it's stunned. It can't do anything. But scout grenades also blind and silence the enemy for a duration. Doesn't tell me what that duration is. I assume it means it's longer than the stun duration, but I haven't been on the receiving end of this very often, I don't think. And this duration apparently increases as you tier up. I don't know if that is the scout stun duration or if it's the blind and silence only, but it's only marginally useful. I don't think you're going to go out of your way to get this doctrine unlocked because I don't think it's all that useful as a doctrine as a whole. But powerful hero, very powerful combo. Try to melee him. Try to melee him to prevent his damage, but try not to melee him too much with too many guys because if you do that, you're getting the combo. So there's your options with him. All right. The last one we're going to do this video, we're going to cut this into a couple parts so these videos don't get too long and keep them nice and short, is Gabriel. We'll talk about Gabriel right now. I know there is one more early game with the chaplain, but the way it works out with 9 heroes is 3 videos of 3 heroes each. So we're going to put him in the medium game, the mid game heroes, even though he's not really a mid game hero. He's an early game hero, but we'll talk about him in the next video. In other words, okay. But Gabriel, let's talk about Gabriel's abilities. Gabriel is a 51 true damage melee character, which means his damage is not reduced by any of the armor out in the game. He'll do full damage to everything. He does 0 range damage, which means he does no damage when he's chasing. He needs to be in melee to do damage. He has 4,000 normal HP, which is pretty tanky in the early game, but he costs 4 elite points. You really can't hold out till 4, especially not in a 1v1, but 2v2, 3v3, maybe one guy on the team can do that. It's a little bit greedy. He's probably not going to be your first hero very often, in other words, because you're probably going to have wanted a 2-point or 3-point hero sooner. So he's probably not actually coming out till 6 or 7 points of elite points because you're going to get that first hero, then him, in which case he's a lot weaker. So he's a little bit clunky to use because a 4-point hero elite's a little bit slow, at least right now. But what does he do? He does decent true damage. He's fairly tanky at 4,000 HP. He has a lot of disruption. He's what I call a disruption hero. He's very good versus infantry, and he's quite annoying versus infantry because he just stops them from doing anything. He has a critical strike that activates every 6 hits, I believe, every 8th. A lot of them are 6, but his is once every 8, which is an increased damage blow, but it gives a knockback in a circle. Yeah, okay. So when he has full charges of and the number of the crit happens more often when his God Splitter charges are high. So basically, that will cause knockback, disrupt AoE knockback, disrupting infantry that he's hitting with that. That's his critical strike. He also has Retribution, which essentially is an activatable version of his critical strike. So when he does that, he knocks stuff down around him again. In addition, this does 2 other things. It projects it looks like a sphere that forms around him of like golden energy, and hostile fire doesn't pass through that and in fact is reflected off that, which makes him even tankier because when that happens, which happens fairly often, every 30 seconds he can use this ability, he's temporarily not taking any range damage. And you can use this ability Retribution to control enemy movement a little bit. Let's say you have a force moving behind an enemy. The enemy is running away, and Gabriel is on the other side of the enemy. If you use Retribution, it knocks the people caught by Retribution away from Gabriel. So you can knock him back into your force towards your force if you position Gabriel right with that. So you can use it a little bit to control enemy movement to some degree. And then finally, he has God Splitter, which is a slow but it's a jump ability that also causes knockback and stun where he lands, but it doesn't have a very far range. It's pretty short distance, and it takes a second to charge up. So basically, if you're just trying to use it as movement, he basically moves as fast just running in a straight line as he does jumping with God Splitter. So really you're using it to get around terrain or for the knockback ability. And you want high charges of God Splitter. It can have up to 3 charges. You want high charges of God Splitter because it makes your Retribution, your critical strike quite a bit better. So you don't actually want to be spamming this ability that much because you're not faster and it makes your other abilities weaker. But it is sometimes useful for getting away, although a lot of the times, because it doesn't make you any faster, you can't use it to get away in a straight line. All right. Gabriel has 2 elite doctrines. The first of these is the one he starts with, which is his presence, which is inspiring drop. When Gabriel is deployed, drop pods heal in a circle upon landing. It's weird. It's weird, the wording, because it almost sounds like it's saying his drop pod heals people, but it's not. It's when he's already on the field, other drop pods you deploy cause healing in a circle. I don't know how much healing. It doesn't tell you the amount. It's kind of annoying. Occasionally it seems to reinforce armies. I'm not overly thrilled about this ability, but it's okay when it triggers. I don't think very much of it. His other ability is the Dreadnought, is a Slam Barrier. This is the one that you can also get for your army if you get Gabriel to level 8, and since he's one of the primary heroes in the campaign, you will get him to level 8 pretty much without doing anything else besides the campaign. The Dreadnought Slam ability creates a temporary barrier, absorbs shots, and reflects projectiles, which is quite a good ability for a Dreadnought. Dreadnoughts are all about being tanks and disrupting stuff, and you use Slam on cooldown on Dreadnoughts, and having it give them extra HP is quite good. I like this ability. I don't go gung-ho for it, mostly because Dreadnoughts aren't all that great of a unit as a whole. They just don't fit in very well, and they're very, very power intensive. But when I do use Dreadnoughts, I do like this ability on them. So, and I don't really often want to use it as my army doctrine, so oftentimes I'll take it on Gabriel if I'm playing Gabriel. Something to mention that we haven't mentioned in these videos, a lot of these abilities, when you read them, don't require that the hero be deployed. So it is possible, for example, to run something like Ironmaw, Gabriel, and, for example, the Imperial Knight. And if you're running this, one of the strategies is actually not to deploy Gabriel. You're just using Gabriel, essentially. If you run Slam Barrier like that, you're just using him for Slam Barrier. You have no real intention of deploying him till much later in the game, and what you're doing is you're taking an early game hero, and then you're kind of running straight to your late game hero to get him out a little bit earlier, while still taking advantage of that secondary ability. That's something a lot of players will do, especially in 3v3s, to get that power spike of the very powerful level 9 or level 10 elite coming out at that time. All right, guys, hopefully this has been helpful, just talking through his abilities, talking through the utility of some of these heroes. I'm going to do 2 more ones for Space Marines. We'll talk about the other 6 heroes, but the videos start getting a little bit long if I try to do it all at once, so we're going to cut them up into 3 parts. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button, and hopefully it's been educational and a little bit useful, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. See you soon.